this meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. All righty, starting with approval of the agenda. Are there any amendments from the commission to today's agenda? If not, do we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, agenda is approved. Next item is approval of the January 13th meeting minutes. Were there any corrections from anybody after reading through those minutes?
There's a typo on page 4. Sharon Worth's last name is misspelled in one location. It's spelled W-O-R-T-H and not W-I-R-T-H.
Got it. So correction on Sharon Worth's last name there. All right. All right. With that correction noted, I would move to approve the January 13th minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right. That brings us now to the public forum. So if there's any items of concern for the public outside of those that are on the agenda for this meeting, this would be the time to bring those forward. All right, seeing no takers, we will move on to item 5 on our agenda, which is consideration of a certificate of appropriateness at 809 Burnett Avenue.
Good evening. This is a certificate of appropriateness for alterations to an existing chimney that you see in this picture. Let me zoom out a little bit. This is the house at 809 Burnett Avenue. The brick chimney that you see in this photograph, the property owners would like to remove it from, including the exterior portion of the chimney down through the attic to below the attic floor. They would like to make some changes to the attic to increase their living space. And it's an alteration because there's still a portion of the chimney remaining. It's not total demolition. So it falls under the alteration standards since it is a contributing structure in the Old Town Historic District. And typically, staff would approve or at least review any alteration that's proposed. In this case, we did review the alteration that's proposed. We did not find that we could approve it according to the standards in the code for chimneys, which I'll get into in a few minutes. But the applicant has the option of taking it forward to the commission for your review. Now, the commission has to follow the same standard staff does. It's not that you can approve something without it meeting the standards. So just a note on that. The section of the code that applies to this with the alterations is found under design guidelines for alterations. We've got it on the screen here. Under section 3113, number 2, chimneys, the 2A, existing brick or stone chimneys shall be retained whenever possible. And, we understand that the property owners desire to remove it to have more flexibility in how they design their attic space. But is it possible to retain it as well? And as staff, we found that it would be possible to retain the chimney. So that's why it's before you this evening. There's other sections that would apply to this request. It's in the residential medium density zone, and that zoning district does not address chimneys specifically, but it's also in the single family conservation overlay district. And there are some provisions of that overlay district that would apply in this case. Under section 3112, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Under section 291101, 1 and 3B, it talks about the purpose of the single family conservation overlay district. And I'll just read a portion of that. The OSFC overlay zone is intended to conserve the existing single-family residential character of areas identified as OSFC adjacent to the downtown. And the character that would be affected is the architectural feature on the house, the chimney. So we believe as staff that applies in this case. There's also some findings under the single family conservation overlay district. And under 3B, it says conservation of architecturally significant structures adds to the distinctiveness of a neighborhood and encourages a sense of place. That's another provision the commission should take into consideration as you deliberate over this request. And then there's the Secretary of the Interior standards in section 3112 of the code. 3112.2 says the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. And then number 5, distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a historic property shall be preserved. Those two in particular, there's also number 9 listed, but 2 and 5 are the most applicable to this request. So again, it talks about preserving the historic character of this contributing structure in the historic district. In your packet, you also have the site sheets for this particular property, the Iowa Site Inventory Form that provides some information about the historic features of the house. It does not mention the chimney, but it mentions the style of architecture and other significant features of the house. Staff believes that the request should be denied, and so we would recommend that the commission select alternative number 2, denial of the approval of a certificate of appropriateness for the alteration that's proposed with removal of that portion of the brick chimney. Be happy to answer any questions you might have. The applicant is here as well.
I have a question. So you mentioned that the applicant did not indicate why it is not possible to retain the chimney.
Yes.
Has staff determined how it would be possible? I'm not an architect or engineer. I'm just wondering, would it be possible to leave the item, the chimney on the outside, yet still take it away on the inside and somehow support that so the look is still there? Or is that not?
Well, we don't try to design the space for them. But we understand it goes through the central part of the space. And, ideally, it'd be nice if that was open to give more options for designing the use of the attic. But is it possible to design use of the attic with the chimney still there? We don't have any evidence that it's not possible.
Or leave the exterior part of the chimney.
Yeah.
Support it somehow, and then remove the interior part. So I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I don't know how that would be done
Okay.
to maintain the exterior and yet take out the part of the attic.
Thank you.
I do have a couple comments on you.
Okay,
You could put a framed structure on the top of the house that would look like the chimney and put a brick veneer on it. And it wouldn't carry the weight that a chimney would. I've actually done 3 houses that had these over the years. And each time we took the chimneys out because they were no longer used, and we used them to run utilities, the space to run utilities up to a 3rd floor or an attic. So you could run water lines or electrical lines. And normally the old houses, the chimneys were right in the middle of the house because the boilers or the furnaces were centrally located in the houses, in the basements. So I imagine if he is trying to do this, that chimney's in the way for a bedroom up there. So I look at it from a construction point of view, and it would be a real hassle for him to maintain that chimney. Could it be done? Sure, it can be done. But is it a pain and is it expensive? Yeah, it would probably be very expensive. And you always have potential for water leaks around chimneys, and you always have to constantly tuck point the mortar. That's something you're doing probably every 10 to 20 years. So I sympathize with the homeowner. And if we're trying to make a balance between single-family residences and maintaining these homes so that families can live in them, and this is a single-family residence, and these people are trying to create additional living space and live in the old town, I applaud them. Those are my comments.
I might mention one other thing for the commission to be aware of. What you're voting on tonight is the proposal before you. You cannot approve an alternative this evening. They would have to come back with that. I mean, you can approve it or deny it, or you can refer it back to staff or the applicant for additional information. But like, for example, your idea, if they wanted to pursue that, they would have to come back. You could not say approve with the condition that they do X, Y, Z. They'd have to come back.
Do you know if that's ever been done before? Like a framed chimney that has brick veneer to look like the original, maybe?
Not that I've seen in this district. I'm sure it's been done somewhere, but not in the Old Town Historic District that I'm aware of.
If we don't issue a certificate of appropriateness,
Yeah.
could they apply for a variance?
They wouldn't meet the criteria for a variance. They could apply, but, you know, there's certain criteria you have to meet for a variance. And they would not meet the criteria. So and actually, I'm not sure they could apply for a variance. I mean, you can apply for a variance under the zoning regulations in chapter 29. This is chapter 31. So I'd have to check further just to see if they can even apply for a variance, but I wouldn't suggest they apply for a variance because the criteria are difficult to meet, and I don't see that they could meet the criteria for a variance if they could even request one.
If we were to, say if we were tonight to take not going the variance route, but take the option of denying the request or the certificate of appropriateness request as is, are they open, which in this case is, you know, the full removal of the chimney? Are they then would they be able to down the road come back and apply for a certificate of appropriateness again with another proposal, for example, as similar to what
They could,
Mike was mentioning? That's still an option for them, correct?
right.
So I have a question about like how it's like a defining feature, because when I was looking at kind of like a reference frame, a lot of the Queen Anne's didn't have a visible chimney. So I was just wondering if it's considered like a definitive feature or if it's just kind of like an additional feature, if it's kind of like a supplementary sort of feature, if it's like a defining feature of a Queen Anne's like visage on top. Does anyone know? Because when I was looking at my reference guide, there was bunch without and bunch with.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if it was like,
I get where you're coming
Yeah.
from. I'm gonna add similar question on how it's been handled in the past potentially, in that,
right.
you know, you have the standards or design guidelines from the Department of the Interior that says, you know, hey, Queen Anne's all about this, and it doesn't mention a chimney in it.
Right.
But the chimney is original to the house,
Mhm.
you know, in this case. So how has it been interpreted in the past between if an item's not on, you know, the Department of the Interior's design standards for a type, does that mean that that is a, you know, removable item or less primary versus what is described on there or not? Or has in the past typically it just been considered anything that was original to that construction of that house being the historic fabric of the house or structure?
Well, there are design criteria
Mhm.
for each architectural style,
Yep.
including the Queen Anne. And the design criteria of the code do not address chimneys. But yet it's part of the historic fabric of that house. You know, it's an historic architectural feature. So it's not significant so much because it's a Queen Anne style of architecture. It's significant because it is the historic feature of that house.
Could we put up a photo of the house again?
Yeah.
Now, this is a quite modest house. Just a normal house, nothing fancy about it. And I think if the chimney weren't there, not one passerby in 100 would notice that it had been removed for what that's worth. Just a comment. And do all the Queen Anne houses in the neighborhood or in the Old Town District have chimneys? You know, has anyone done a survey?
I do not, because that's not something that was noted in the survey.
That might be something the applicant wants to do if he could find other houses, Queen Anne, without a chimney.
You can, the applicant, you can come forward and add your remarks if you wish.
So I actually referenced another property in the neighborhood, which is 2 houses to the south on the corner of Burnett and 8th. That is a very similar style to this house, but it does not have a chimney. And then also the house directly next door to ours has a much larger chimney and more ornate, and being on the corner, it's a much more visible piece of that property. And I referenced both of those in the application. I have a note from the contractor that I've been talking to that basically talks about the difficulty of bracing that chimney if we were to try to just remove the interior portion of it. So I'll read that statement from him next. So to whom it may concern, I am Zach Shearer, the owner of Shearer Construction. I was called to Eric Romsdahl's house to check out their attic area in consideration of finishing the attic for living quarters. After looking at their attic and coming up with a plan, it was obvious the chimney in the middle of the attic would thwart any possibility of utilizing any finished space we create from being furnished or efficiently lived in. The chimney is not used in the house for any purpose and is so far deteriorated that future use would be inconceivable. Therefore, the best path forward would be to remove the chimney and patch the hole in the roof that comes of it. I did calculations on the weight of the chimney and found that if we were to even consider suspending the chimney portion that is above the roof line, we would be suspending around 1,800 pounds of brick from 1905 that need tuck pointed over children's bedrooms. With the way the home is built, supporting the amount of weight in that attic would be extremely dangerous when considering the current condition of the chimney and the framing of the house. The only technically possible solution would require a very intricate fabrication of welded metal I-beams following the rafters to the exterior walls, and then even further taking that load to the footing walls under the first floor. This would be so elaborate and expensive it would make the project unfeasible. Even if that route would be considered, it would still be holding up almost a ton of bricks and neat tuck pointed over bedrooms, and the thought of that would keep me up at night. And again, kind of referencing where that chimney is at in the space upstairs, the way the stairs currently go up to the attic are such that the space from the stairwell to the chimney really negates the space even further. And there's no feasible way to change the layout of the staircase going upstairs either. So it makes it much more challenging to make it a more usable space. There's actually no utilities that run through the chimney at this point. There are water lines run up along the backside of the house to the west, along with also where the stack for the sewer venting goes, as there's multiple other bathrooms within that same stack. There's also electrical up there already. At one point, this was a semi-furnished space in the fact that this house was at one point a fraternity and then an apartment building. So there's already some rough finish work up there that would not necessarily need to even utilize the remaining chimney portion. So, and I could pull up photos to show you, but looking down from the roof line into that attic space, there's signs of water that have come down that we've had it, new flashing put on it. We had it tuck pointed and recoated and capped because we were getting birds in the chimney. And it was a challenge just to even find someone willing to do that work because of the height of the house and the height of the chimney. Most people just won't even touch it, even if they are masons. So trying to find a willing even chimney sweep that would handle it, it took a while because they had to rent a boom lift to be able to do it. So it does long-term pose challenges from a maintenance standpoint alone. And I get that it is unique to that structure, but again, looking from other angles on the street, if you look at the house straight on, you really don't even see the chimney. So those are the main reasons that we were requesting the removal of it. Would there potentially be the option of putting up a facade coated structure to replicate that? Possibly, but again, that comes with some other challenges, I think, from a structural standpoint, just maintaining it even. So that's really why we were wanting to do this. So. Do you have any questions for me?
I guess I have one about, you mentioned those 2 homes. Do you know if those are originally the way that they are? As you mentioned, I don't remember from.
As far as I know,
Okay.
just looking at the structure of those buildings, I don't see where, it's particularly the one that does not have the chimney. I don't see where there might have been any changes made, but again, it is qualified probably as like a duplex at this point, so hard to say if there have been alterations.
And do you know if this chimney's ever been like altered in any way before this at all? At all?
Not that I'm
Past,
aware
okay.
of. We were told it's essentially non-functional. The way the flue is designed, we wouldn't be able to make it into a wood-burning fireplace. It's likely an old coal fireplace. And just the firebox itself is pretty deteriorated as well. So even just within the house, it has someone put in a gas insert, but it's basically an open set of bare logs that has a gas line running to it. So it doesn't even meet code. We don't use it. I've had the gas shut off to it. There would have to be extensive work even just to be able to put an insert in the base of that fireplace.
Have you looked into the idea of building a facade with just brick veneer, thin brick veneer?
Not specifically at this point. The hope was that we could just,
Because a large amount of the expense is just removal of this chimney.
it would incur some expense, yeah.
Right. So if that chimney were gone, then all you have is the expense of putting up a frame structure with a thin veneer brick on the outside,
Yeah.
making sure it's waterproof. And I don't know, probably a little bit of structural reinforcement inside, but it might be feasible. I don't know.
Potentially. I mean, ultimately anything's feasible if you want to spend the time
Well,
and
I mean,
money on it.
And
But
not extremely
I feel like
exorbitantly expensive,
No.
more expensive than just removing
true.
the chimney.
Would like another like time era appropriate but smaller thing, like kind of disconnect the chimney, but then put a smaller kind of like facade thing on there that replicates that? I'm just suggesting potentially instead of putting something so large, just something smaller, if that would be
I guess the
Yeah.
decision there, I think, would potentially lie with,
right.
would we have to replicate it specifically to what it looks like or as closely as that, or would we be able to have it smaller?
Mhm.
I guess personally, I feel like long-term being able to seal up the roof and just making it all the same across would be the better option from a water hazard standpoint, as opposed to just having another structure that would have to potentially be maintained in a different way, different fashion.
I guess would that be an option, Ray? If that would be that's like applicable is like a time era appropriate but smaller kind of like facade looking thing, like so you can remove the chimney but then still retain like historic value to that if it's similar to that era,
A smaller version of this.
or like a small like a more time appropriate like period appropriate chimney, but like a kind of like a facade of one that's a era appropriate. Would that be applicable in any sense?
We'd have to look at it to see.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question. Do you know the other houses you mentioned, the other Queen Anne's in the neighborhood? Does their chimney look like this? Or is it a different shape or
Our
size?
neighbor, it's taller and the brickwork is more ornate. There's other parts that have different positioning to add to the character of the chimney.
And do you know if theirs is for was originally for a boiler or was it more for a fireplace?
I'm not sure.
Do you know?
No.
Is it also at the interior of the house?
It is in the interior, but it's set further back within the structure. So it makes that attic space more usable. It's just a bigger house overall. And so it isn't necessarily just directly in the middle of that structure.
And the other house that you mentioned, do you know about that one?
I don't. I was just looking at other photos of houses in the neighborhood, and using our neighbor as kind of the comparative option that has a chimney versus the one that's kind of across the street from them that doesn't have the chimney. And that house is almost identical in design to our house, the one that does not have the chimney.
Or do you know if it did at one time?
I don't know. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So Any other comments or thoughts as we, any other discussion on this? I'm kind of tracking what everybody's saying. I will caution one element in there for me is, there construction, there's options to replicate, historical fabric, and it's been done many a times. Commercially, we've done it on projects too, and we do historic renovations of buildings. Sometimes there's historic material that's gone missing over time that we then replicate and put back in place, et cetera. So, I mean, there are those paths, but traditionally, usually, if a historic material is in place, the National Park Service or anything that's a landmark, they will automatically default to you protect and maintain that existing material. You don't replicate it. You don't take something out just to put something new back in its place if it's there and if it's salvageable. That would be my one caution in this instance. But obviously the other side of that coin is the understanding that, this is, a difficult burden to build around, and one need to be conscious of that. But ultimately, if it is per code, a historic fabric piece, it would seem that the ordinance would point towards this is supposed to stay there. Just laying that side of the argument out there, not saying everybody has to take that, but wanted to put it there. And then just a reminder, as we're looking at what's on the agenda tonight, like we've talked around on the replacement aspect as well, but essentially if we accept number 1, that would be approving them to go through with demolition of the chimney and not putting anything back. If we accept number 2, that's outright denying them what the current proposal is of demolishing the chimney. So we're saying that chimney has to stay there. Option number 3 is the one where you send it back to the owner for more information or essentially revisions or other proposals, basically telling them to amend it. So just want to lay it out there before there's any, motions on 1 or 2, just that what those definitively mean. So,
I have a question. I'm deeply sympathetic to this
Yeah.
request, deeply sympathetic. But this afternoon, as I was going through the material, as I read it, I guess I'm asking about our responsibilities. I couldn't find authority. I couldn't find it in the code where we have the authority to allow it. As much as I want to, honestly, as much as I want to, as I read it, I kept trying to figure out where's the loophole that the commission can use its discretion, blah, blah, blah. And I can't find it. Maybe I'm just not reading the code right. So I'm
I don't know the
That's what I was
exact
gonna say,
line, but I
question.
think, Ray, is there a line somewhere in there that essentially what you touched on earlier, that staff reviews, and if you deny one, that there's a line in there somewhere, right? That's the outlet that they can then kind of appeal and go to
Yeah, if
us.
it's-
Is that
if
correct?
It's an
Or
alteration.
under alterations
and-
only,
and-
right?
And we cannot approve it as staff. They have the option of taking it to the commission.
So the alteration section, if I'm looking at the right one, which is in 3110, it says a certificate of appropriate for an alteration shall be permitted in the following instances. And it lists 3 instances and we don't meet those. So I guess I'm just trying to find out, how can we interpret, if it's clear, we sort of have a view of this, or maybe we do, I don't know, I want to speak for the commission. But I'm looking for where we have the authority, if we chose to approve it, where that authority lies.
You have to follow the regulations and the design guidelines. So I'm not aware of anything in the code that says you can approve this.
I just have a couple of questions to throw out. So the design guidelines for Queen Anne my understanding is, does not address chimneys as an integral part of a Queen Anne house design.
That's correct.
Okay,
I think
The two-door
chimneys are
style.
just not in the Department of Interior standards in general. It's not an item that they included on. I don't think it's unique just to Queen Anne. It's just not an item that they
Right.
included.
Chimneys aren't listed in any of the, I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah,
The
me
in
too.
the
Department of
two-door,
Interior stuff,
the
it's not
two-door
listed.
style
Tudor.
is the only one that lists
Yeah.
chimney. Aside from like specific buildings within Ames, it's when you're looking at the different like housing styles, the
Mhm.
two-door style is the only one that specifically
That
calls it out.
specifically
okay,
mentions the chimney.
doesn't do that for bungalows either?
Does not.
Sometimes, okay.
Queen Anne, there's no chimney.
Okay, then the other question is, so the 3110, 2A is what I'm looking at here, the certificate of appropriateness regarding alteration. Then A is an architectural feature has deteriorated to the point that it must be replaced. I guess I would be interested to know what you all think, or if the homeowner has additional information about the safety of that chimney, if it needs to be re-tuck pointed or supported in some way, or what the actual condition of the chimney is. That would, apart from this project, would it be under discussion for removal due to deterioration or not? And if you want to speak to that, feel free.
So
Sorry.
the visible part, we did have tuck pointed within the last couple years, and then a waterproof coating applied to that to try to help protect the brickwork. My understanding was the flue, the liner would need to be replaced anyway. And there was some other debris in there from birds and things like that. We did have it capped to help try to combat those issues, but it's obviously subsequent to future weather issues anyway. I guess my one question is, just as a side note, would be if it were damaged in some event, another derecho, a tornado, something like that, would I then have to be required to rebuild that same chimney? Is kind of my thought process on that. If it's that integral, would I have to then replace it long term? So
And my reading of that section would indicate that it may not have to be replaced if it were damaged or deteriorated. Have you had anybody talk to you about the structural integrity?
I mean, beyond what I've mentioned, no. It runs all the way to the floor. It's integral to kind of the layout of the rest of the house, and that's why we would not go any lower in terms of the removal than the attic floor, just because of those considerations. But it long term, I think my concern would be at some point, does that exterior portion just become damaged to the point that you can't necessarily maintain it well?
I think just a point to add on to what you were asking, Kate, in section 3110 under certificate of appropriateness, item number 4, it reads, consideration of an application for certificate of appropriateness shall apply the design guidelines which shall pertain to all historic preservation districts and historic landmarks, and the design criteria which shall apply only to the particular historic district or historic landmark for which they are enacted. In each instance, the commission may grant exemptions to the requirements for an alteration if it determines that the cost of replication is prohibitive. So I think in consideration of the cost, I think that might be our only leeway there, where we're able to accept something like that. Because that doesn't fall under the specific alteration or the specific like new construction element. I think that's its own thing. So I guess we do have, permissibility there, I think.
Going back to the design guidelines, existing brick or stone chimney shall be retained whenever possible. So if you determine that it is possible, that it's not possible to retain it, then you could approve it. But I don't know how you would determine it's not possible to retain
Well,
it.
let's just say they came in and said, hey, we've renovated our attic, and to have the room to make it whether we wanted it, we knocked out all that brick that was in the middle of the room. And now our roof is going to fall in because we've got this chimney structure sitting on our roof. So we have to remove that because it's not possible to keep it because our house is going to collapse. I mean, that's an
Well,
extreme.
they would never get a
scenario.
permit from the city to renovate the attic and leave that part of the chimney if it's a hazard. I mean, they have to get a building permit.
Ah, got it, yeah.
They wouldn't get a building permit that would create a hazard.
But the part where the homeowner was talking about a derecho coming through and damaging, then that's where we get into the cost and the deterioration, I think.
I do believe that that does kind of fall under the risk, like the assumption of risk if you own a home is to repair it when it is damaged, so I would apply that to like anybody who has anything like that in Old Town, because it is, when you buy a home, there are going to be certain things you have to repair when damaged, especially by like a natural disaster or something like that. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Okay, a decision to deny the application would not prevent him, the applicant, from coming back later with some
With a
other
different
proposal.
proposal, I believe that's correct, right? They would be able to submit a new application for a certificate of appropriateness with a different proposal to
They could,
than the one that than this specific one, yeah.
yes, they could.
I think we also have to think about what precedent this might set
Mhm.
for the next person who comes up. Might not be a chimney, might be, something else.
And whether when we think about Chapter 31 changes that we might want to make this year, if this is the kind of thing we might want to think about, are there situations where these kinds of things we might want to approve on a limited basis and amend Chapter 31 to allow it?
I think that gets a little risky.
Well, then we
Yeah.
can't allow these people to make improvements to their house. That's tough.
Or we could amend the chapter before they come back. Theoretically.
right, if we're through with discussion, is there anybody that is comfortable making a motion on this one or wishes to propose? A motion towards one of the options?
I have great empathy and sympathy for the situation. However, being a lawyer, I kind of look at the plain language of the law, the rules, and regulations, and don't really, I talked about a couple of the arguments that would be the possibility as far as deterioration and the design standard, not mentioning chimneys, but given the current circumstances, I would move that we deny approval of the certificate of appropriateness, but leave the door open if the homeowner so wishes to come back and propose a visual replica of some sort, as mentioned, a wood frame with a veneer, a lighter weight veneer, something like that. But my motion simply is that we deny the certificate.
Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
All right, any added discussion before vote? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of selecting alternate number 2, which is denial of this specific certificate of appropriateness, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed, same sign.
I'll abstain.
All right, noted. Mr. Murphy abstains from the vote. All right, that is item 5 of our agenda. Next up is item 6, which is continued discussion of the HPC's letter sent to the mayor and city council regarding the zoning text amendment that went through the zoning board of adjustments. And yeah. So I think this one's more just open to the commission on more discussion of it if we wish. Last time we kind of left off, we had talked about, we had sent the one letter initially to the city, the council, and staff to express that concern of wondering if we were supposed to be involved in that discussion at all. Last time we kind of talked around that for a while and then tabled the discussion of sending any follow-up communication to them there. So I think more of this is just a conversation at this point after ruminating on it for another month if we wish to provide any other communications there or questions, or if we're moving
Did they
on from
ever
her.
answer? Did anybody ever answer the letter?
Nope. So. At this point, I'd kind of say, we've sent a letter, they didn't respond to it. We'll send another letter, they might not respond to it. So it's done and through zoning board. So I'm pretty well ready to move on from it. Obviously, we can, we have it down in commission comments to kind of discuss clarifying more of what all we are to do. But just in terms of this item in general, I'm personally ready to move on from it, but open to if anybody else feels otherwise.
I don't, if they haven't
Yeah,
responded, I
it
don't
is
see
what it
any
is.
point
Yeah.
in moving further with it. I think they know our feelings on the matter.
Yep.
And that was the main, I think, goal.
Mhm. All right, if no comments to the contrary, we'll move on to item number 7, which is commission comments. And we do have one bullet point under that was added by request, and that is to consider placing, just kind of background on this, we have to place things on this item came up in an email from one of our commission members requesting that we kind of spell out what our responsibilities are. In order to place stuff on our agendas, though, we have to make those requests 2 weeks prior to the meetings. This came in a little bit after that. So we added it on here as a reminder to be able to approve if we wish to add that to the agenda for next meeting. But essentially that item was to review, have staff help us, and then us to review essentially what all of the HPC's responsibilities are in the municipal code and essentially what those mean, just so we all have the same clear understanding of what is supposed to come across our commission for discussion and where we have, for lack of a better term, where we have authorities and where we do not. But yeah, I think, Kate,
I'm a
this
little
was your item.
confused
So if
because
you have
when we
any-
talked about this last month, we voted to talk about it this month. And we also said that in the meantime, somebody would gather information regarding developing definitive commission rules and procedures, and that we'd formally request supplemental documentation and context from the city to inform commission discussion. So that was part of what we voted
Or
on
no
last
minutes
week
from
and
last time.
last
Yeah.
month, and there's no additional information and there's no documentation and context from the city. So I'm wondering what happened to that part of that motion.
What additional information do you want?
Well, I guess I'd start by saying if we move something and it's in the minutes, it said we all approved it for the next meeting, because it says for the next meeting, then if you're unclear what additional information we want, we should learn about that we should get the question before the next meeting. I thought we were going to come to this meeting to discuss this and that the additional information would have been provided in advance of this meeting. That's what we moved. And if you were unclear on what information you thought might be useful, you could just ask the chair or ask one of us. But given that we don't have it, I'm happy to suggest we discuss this next month when there's some additional information that we can use to try to figure out the definition of the commission's roles and procedures, which was what we spent an hour talking about last time. Because the commission's roles are identified in 2 places in Chapter 29 and in 1 place in Chapter 31. But it wasn't clear during last month's meeting. We all had a consistent view on what those words meant. So simply looking at the 2 sections of 29 and the 1 section of 31 might be a good place to start. And I think you could look in the email I sent, because I think I included both of those in my email.
Does this have to do with the text amendment?
I'm sorry?
Does it have to do with the text?
It's
amendment?
irrelevant. The text
Yeah.
amendment, the text amendment is done,
I know it's done, but
but it has to do with what the commission understands its responsibilities to be.
as outlined as specified in Chapter 29 and Chapter 31. Okay.
So I guess, Mr. Chair, I'd suggest that we postpone the decision on this matter until the next monthly meeting. In the meantime, have the staff gather additional information regarding developing definition of the commission roles and procedures and formally request supplemental documentation and context from the city to inform the commission decision. Discussion.
All right, that is a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion prior to vote?
Can I? Yeah,
Oh, yep, you
I
can jump
ask-
in. Mhm.
As far as supplemental information, I don't want to assume anything. So we would probably like chapter 29 and chapter 31 and like pointing out, these are the sections that refer to the Historic Preservation Commission. And do we also then want any additional information beyond that, beyond what's explicitly in the code? Like, I know that this has come about because of the text amendment, and how sort of the interpretation of that one line in chapter 31 might have differed between us and council and the planning department, what have you. So do we want additional, like, any information beyond what's in the code as far as what they are, how other folks, departments, city council, whatever, are interpreting things?
Might be a good idea. What
Is
some other
is that
cities might
something?
do.
Yeah, is that something we can ask for? I don't know if that's something we can ask for. But
That might be a good idea.
if, I mean, at a base level, we definitely want, identified where the HPC is referenced in chapter 29, chapter 31, but we all can find that online also and read it for ourselves. So I don't know, like, is there something more that's going to get us closer to our goal, I guess?
Yeah. And we can read those sections, but I think the other layer of that is just understanding what, the staff's interpretation
Yes,
of
yep.
those
yeah,
responsibilities are.
that's- Yeah.
But I would say, I think we know what the staff's interpretation is. I
Yeah,
think
but
we want to understand whether we agree with the staff.
yeah.
So we'll provide for you chapter 29, chapter 31, the sections that apply. Is there something else?
Is there like a staff commentary or something? I don't know.
Well,
Yeah,
I would ask if there's any memos or documents like that that would explain if there's any differences to how our responsibilities are interpreted.
Well, there were the two appeals that went to the zoning board of adjustment.
Right.
But those are really not about what is the HPC's role. This is really about what is the HPC's role, right? It's really not about the text amendment. Forget the text amendment. It's about the HPC's role in the process. And maybe if there's anything in the file explaining what was intended when the HPC was established, any historical guidance, that might be useful. I'm not sure if you have any of that.
I don't know.
All right. So I was just trying to think what section I was under. Commission comments is an okay spot for it's an agenda item. So if it's particular to consider placing an item on the March 10th, blah, 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 then yes, a comment can be made to it, but
I don't have much to say. It won't take long.
yep, you can take a minute.
David Carter, 709 Douglas. Just a couple suggestions on where you might get information. Of course, the Secretary Interior standards. And then there is a certified local government agreement between the city and the state historical preservation office that was implemented at the outset of the establishment of the commission. So there's that. And then I believe the State Historical Preservation Office has training materials. And it might be helpful, they might be willing to provide some training or provide somebody to come and discuss the role of the Historic Preservation Commission with the members. So those are just some suggestions.
Thank you.
If we'd like to reach out to SHPO, I just recently got a job there, so I could talk to somebody in the office if they'd be willing to come to Ames and talk with us if we want to move forward with that idea.
All right, so circling back, still have a motion active. Are we good with the discussion items that occurred on that motion, standing as you have it, Kate, for vote? Is that still good? Okay. If so, then all in favor of the motion for the requested items to be provided and part of the agenda for next meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, same sign. Alrighty. Beyond that bullet point, any other commission comments? So this is just kind of the open floor for commission for items that weren't specific to the agenda.
I have a non-controversial topic this time. Some people that live in my neighborhood and I are working with the museum on trying to create some kind of a city event to, kind of raise awareness on historic resources in the city. The idea that we've sort of circled on right now is doing something similar to Open House Chicago, if you've ever been to that. It's organized by the Chicago Architecture Center, whom I contacted yesterday and was eager to help. And so I wanted to know whether the commission would be interested in supporting, participating, being aware of, working with that event. It's just something we're doing on our own, working with the museum. We're going to also talk to the historic preservation guy Ted at Iowa State and some architects in town and some other organizations. But we thought the commission, because it's all about historic resources and historic preservation, might want to be interested in this. So I just put it out there.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on the event a little bit? Is it open houses like within those homes? It's kind of a
At this
home
point, we've
show,
only
essentially.
met a couple of times on it. But at this point, what we're thinking is getting a handful of buildings, probably like maybe some in the downtown-ish area for at least this year. And then working with the museum to get a bunch of information on those, and then having a docent at each of those buildings. And then people could go, we'd organize it probably at the end of the summer, early fall on a farmer's market day, and have people just be able to go to those locations anytime between 10 and 4 or something, and just learn about those buildings, how they were preserved, what they were intended to be, their history, probably have some storyboards of how the building has looked through time, some discussion about it. For instance, if it's a building that's been renovated a number of times, we'd probably talk about how that was renovated and why those decisions were made, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea and it'd fit well into the community outreach part of our work plan. So, yeah.
Have you determined which structures you want yet, or is that still?
We're still,
work?
as I said, we've had 2
Yeah,
meetings
yeah,
on this. We're still in the forming
I wasn't sure if
stage.
you were.
Yeah,
Maybe this one.
we're not there yet. So what should I report back to this team? That the HPC wants to be kept advised, or that the HTC wants to be listed as, a supporter? I don't know what that means actually, but or do you just want to wait and hear more about it?
Could we find out more about how we would fit into this?
Absolutely.
And I'd be interested. That does sound, because, in the neighborhood that Bob and I live in, we're pending before for a historic district. And I've thought, and I've talked to a few people about it, that, if and when that happens, that it would be neat to have in the summertime, some public tours that we could do a little neighborhood walk and explain the history of some of these houses and the style and that sort of thing. And so I think that kind of thing would
Exactly.
fit right in with what you're doing
Yeah.
too. And so, but that's not, that would be a couple of years down
Sure.
the road
Yeah.
probably.
And if this is successful, we'd like to try to do one each year with a different aspect of the
Yep.
city.
Right,
Mhm.
right. That would be. I think
There's
that would
something like
be-
that in Des Moines. So I wonder if we could like look at Des Moines and see how they incorporate like their HPC in, because I know they have like a mid-century modern
Yeah.
tour.
Or
But I don't know how they involve.
IAF puts those on in Des Moines. It's Iowa Architectural Foundation, but
Okay. I'll report back next month, okay?
sounds good.
Thanks.
All right. I think we're on to staff comments. Anything additional for us, Ray?
No comments by staff.
All right. That brings us to the end of our agenda. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hear none. This meeting is adjourned.